My son, James, handed me the iPad for my birthday. "Just for games, Mum," he'd said, smiling. "Don't worry about the complicated stuff." He thought I was too old for technology. But that night, as I lay in bed, my grandson's nervous face kept replaying in my mind. He'd just invested his entire inheritance, £50,000, with James's new wife, and something felt wrong. So I ignored my son's advice, and on this too complicated device, I found the lie. All 50,000 pounds of it. It had all started 6 weeks earlier, on a rare sunny afternoon in the garden. My grandson, Leo, was explaining his future. At 19, he was a wonderfully earnest young man, navigating the world with the unique lens of his autism. His grandfather, my late husband, Robert, had left him a trust fund, enough to secure his future, enough for a deposit on a flat someday. Chloe, James's wife of 6 months, sat beside him, nodding encouragingly, her hand resting on his arm. "It's about energetic alignment, Leo," she'd said, her voice smooth as honey. "The company, Aura Bloom, isn't just selling products, it's selling a lifestyle, a holistic pathway." She'd painted a picture of a wellness empire built on ethically sourced botanicals and ancient healing principles. And Leo, with his pure and trusting heart, saw only the beauty of it, not the murky depths beneath. The following Sunday, Chloe presented her business plan. It was a masterpiece of empty jargon printed on thick, glossy paper, full of words like synergy, vibrational commerce, and holistic profit sharing. But it was completely devoid of numbers. Balance sheets, cash flow projections, a basic profit and loss forecast, none of it was there. 40 years I spent as an accountant. I know what a sound business proposal looks like, and this wasn't it. "It's a beautiful concept, Chloe," I said carefully, "but I can't see any of the financials. A new venture needs a clear 5-year plan." She smiled at me, a dazzling, condescending smile. "Oh, Evelyn, this isn't a traditional business model. We're operating in the new economy. It's about creating an energetic return on investment." James jumped in to support her. "Mom, you wouldn't understand. Startup culture is different now. It's more agile, less focused on old-fashioned things like paperwork." I looked from my son, a man I had taught how to read his first bank statement, to his new wife, who was about to fleece my grandson. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted metal. This was the moment I realized this wasn't just naivety. This was a calculated play, and they were banking on the assumption that I was too old, too out of touch to see it. The final transgression didn't come with a shout, but with a smile. We were at dinner a week later, a celebration for Leo's first investment. James presented me with the iPad, a birthday gift, he said, for my games. "Chloe can show you how it works, Mum," he said, turning to his wife. "She's brilliant with this stuff." Chloe took the device and began explaining how to open an app, her voice slow and loud, as if I were a small child. She showed me how to swipe, how to tap. "You just press your finger here, Evelyn," she explained, her perfectly manicured nail pointing to a large, obvious icon. "See? Not so scary." I said nothing. I just watched my son nod in agreement. And then he said it, the words that broke something inside me for good.
Don't worry about the rest of it, Mum. Bank accounts and all that, it's too complicated. Honestly, you're too old to be worrying about technology." They saw me as a relic, a doting, technologically illiterate grandmother who shouldn't trouble her head with finance or fraud. They dismissed my 40 years of balancing books as an irrelevant ancient craft. And in that moment, I realized a very serious question had to be asked. At what point does patronizing a parent become a form of theft? When they dismiss your wisdom just to steal from your own family? Let me know what you think in the comments. As for me, I decided it was time to show them exactly what this old woman and her complicated iPad could do.
That night, after James and Chloe had gone home, basking in the glow of their supposed generosity, I took the iPad out of its box. The smooth, cool metal felt alien in my hands. James was right about one thing. I had never used a device like this before. But he had forgotten who he was talking to. I wasn't just his mother. I was Evelyn Hayes, the woman who had reconciled the accounts for a multi-million-pound manufacturing firm for 2 decades using nothing but a pencil and a ledger. The woman who taught herself Lotus 123 on a clunky office PC when he was still in primary school. A new system, a new interface. It was just a new set of rules. And I have always been very, very good with rules. I bypassed the games, I connected to the Wi-Fi, and I began my work. I started where any good accountant would, with the basics. Orabloom, Chloe's company, had to be registered. A simple search at company's house told me everything I needed to know. The company had been incorporated 3 weeks ago. Director, Chloe Brooks. Stated nature of business, retail sale via mail order houses or via internet. And its assets? 0. Its registered office was a post box in central London. It was a shell, nothing more. But that wasn't proof, it was just a red flag. The kind of thing James, in his blind faith, would dismiss as startup agility. I needed more.
My earned power wasn't a secret investment account. It was simpler than that. It was the knowledge that people, especially people like Chloe, are rarely as clever as they think they are. She might hide her financials, but she couldn't resist showing off. I didn't need a search warrant. I just needed to know where to look. I found her on Instagram, a curated feed of wellness mantras, sunsets, and artfully arranged bowls of quinoa. "Invest in your soul," read one caption beneath a photo of her meditating on a yoga mat. Then I went to the tagged photos, the pictures other people had taken of her, and there it was. A post from one of her friends, dated 2 days ago. Chloe, grinning, holding up a brand new Chanel handbag in the middle of their Bond Street boutique. The caption read, "Treat yourself. Chloe's celebrating the launch of her new biz venture." The bag, I knew from a quick search, retailed for just over £8,000. An odd purchase for the founder of a startup with 0 assets. This was still just a clue, not an indictment, but it was a thread, and I have always been very good at pulling threads until the entire fabrication unravels. She wouldn't have bought that bag with a credit card. It would be too easy to trace. It had to be a debit transaction. She had opened a new business account, most likely. The question was, which bank? And that is when I remembered Robert, my late husband, had a mantra of his own. Always check the fine print.
I pulled Chloe's glossy business plan out of the recycling bin where I'd tossed it. It was still mostly useless, a symphony of buzzwords with no substance. I read it again, not for what it said, but for what it might inadvertently reveal. And there, on the very last page, at the bottom, in a faint gray font so small it was almost illegible, was her mistake. Banking partner, Finterra Digital Bank, a new, trendy, online-only bank popular with freelancers and tech startups. Chloe had added it to seem legitimate. She never imagined anyone would read it. She certainly never imagined her supposedly out-of-touch mother-in-law would. But the bigger mistake was that Finterra was the same bank my son, James, used. He'd moved to it a year ago, convinced it was the future of finance. He was so proud of its features, its security, its user-friendly interface. He had even, in a moment of rare filial consideration, insisted on setting up an account for me, just in case. I never used it, but he had linked it to his account as a trusted family contact, so I could easily transfer money to him if he ever needed it. An electronic umbilical cord. He'd forgotten all about it, and so, it seemed, had Chloe.
It took me less than 5 minutes. I logged into my forgotten Finterra account, thanks to James's helpful setup. His accounts were linked to mine under a family dashboard. And because he was a signatory on Leo's trust, another helpful arrangement he'd made after my husband died, Leo's account was visible too. And there it was, not hidden, not laundered, just sitting in plain sight. 6 weeks ago, a single transaction, a wire transfer of £50,000 from the Robert Hayes Trust for Leo Hayes to a business account under the name Aura Bloom Ltd. Then, from the Aura Bloom account, the cascade of consequences began. A direct debit to Chanel London, £8,250. A charge from a luxury car rental company for a weekend in a Range Rover, £1,200. Multiple charges from Net-a-Porter, Harvey Nichols, Selfridges. There were transfers to Chloe's personal account labeled Founder's Salary. A £10,000 withdrawal. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. She wasn't just careless, she was brazen. She believed her own lies. She believed we were all too stupid, too trusting, too old to ever look. She saw Leo's inheritance not as his future, but as her present. The first consequence wasn't a confrontation. It was a simple electronic transaction, or rather, the lack of one. The next morning, I contacted Finterra as the co-trustee on Robert's trust for Linneo, and armed with a downloaded copy of the Aura Bloom bank statement, I reported suspected fraudulent activity. The process was swift and impersonal. An algorithm, not a person, made the decision. At 10:17 a.m. on Saturday, as Chloe and James were likely planning which high-end restaurant to visit for lunch, the Aura Bloom account, and by extension Chloe's personal debit card linked to it, was frozen. The first conduit of information was a text message, a panicked, misdirected message from Chloe to James, which he must have received while in another room. But he'd left his iPad on my Wi-Fi network from our last visit, a silly oversight. And on the shared screen of my own too complicated device, I saw it appear.
They've frozen the account. The card was just declined at Harrods. What do I do?" I did nothing. I simply took a screenshot. The beautiful architectural world they had built on a foundation of lies was beginning to show cracks, and I knew they wouldn't look at the foundations. They would look for someone to blame.
He showed up that evening. I heard his car pull up too fast, the slam of the door echoing in the quiet street. He didn't knock. He used his own key, storming in like he still had the right. "What did you do?" he demanded, standing over me in my own living room. His face was a mess of confusion and anger. "Chloe is in a panic. The bank won't tell her anything. They said there's a fraud investigation linked to your name. You've ruined everything." I looked up at him from my armchair. My son, a man I had taught to tie his own shoes, now shouting at me because his wife could no longer buy designer clothes with my grandson's inheritance. "Ruined what, James?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Did I ruin Chloe's holiday shopping? Did I interrupt the fraudulent liquidation of your son's future?" He stared at me, the words finally registering. "Fraudulent? What are you talking about? It was a business investment, a bit risky, maybe, but was it a business investment?" I interrupted, "when she spent 8,000 pounds of it on a handbag, or 10,000 on a founder's salary that she paid to herself a week after the company was formed?" I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, quickly extinguished by loyalty, or perhaps complicity. "You are twisting things," he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "You've always resented Chloe, always been jealous of our success." He thought this was about jealousy. He failed to see the 40 years of quiet competence sitting in the armchair before him. "You let this happen," he finally said, his anger returning as a form of defense. "You're the trustee. You let her spend the money, and now you're blaming us."
"You're right," I said calmly. As trustee, I did let it happen. I let it happen for exactly 2 weeks, long enough for Chloe to create a clear, irrefutable paper trail. I reached for the folder on my side table and placed it on the dining table between us. "The beauty of modern banking," I said, my voice level, "is that everything leaves a digital footprint." I slid the printed statements across the table. Page after page of Aura Bloom's expenditures, highlighted in yellow, were the dates, the vendors, the amounts. Chanel, Harrods, the Mayfair Grill, a 5-star hotel in the Cotswolds. That, I pointed to one charge, was for a research trip, I assume. Chloe looked at the papers, her face draining of all color. James stared at them, then at his wife, then back at the papers, the architecture of his denial crumbling before his eyes. He saw the dates of the luxury purchases. He saw the transfers to Chloe's personal account. He saw it all laid out in the sterile, undeniable language of a bank statement. He finally looked at me, the last shred of indignation gone, replaced with a dawning, sickening understanding. They were speechless. The boardroom they thought they commanded was my simple dining room table. Winning back Leo's money was one thing, but making my incompetent son and his wife accountable for the damage they'd done was another matter entirely. Their future depended on it. If you want to see the fallout and the tough decisions that came next, make sure you subscribe, because this story isn't over yet.
My victory wasn't a shouting match. It was a series of quiet, decisive actions. The bank, armed with my evidence, not only restored the remaining funds to Leo's trust, but also flagged Chloe's accounts for a full review. But that wasn't enough. Trust, once broken so profoundly, cannot simply be glued back together. A new structure was needed. I drew up a new arrangement with my solicitor. It was fair, but it was unambiguous. The meeting took place in his office a week later. I brought Leo with me. It was his future, and he deserved to see it secured. Chloe and James came, their arrogance replaced by a tense, resentful silence. My solicitor laid out the new terms. The recovered funds would be placed in a new, more secure trust for Leo. As the founding trustee, I would have sole oversight until he turned 25. James would be removed as a signatory. "But he's my father," Leo said, his only words during the meeting. "I know," I replied gently, "and he will always be your father. This isn't about love, Leo. It's about protecting what your grandfather left for you." I then turned to my son. "As for the money Chloe has already spent," I slid a second document across the table. "I have arranged a formal loan repayment schedule for you both. It is drawn from your joint account at a modest but fair rate of interest. It will be paid back into Leo's trust over the next 10 years.
My victory was not reclaiming my son. It was reclaiming myself. I didn't just restore the old order. I built the new one. I took the expertise they dismissed and turned it into a purpose. I started a small, free workshop at the local community center. Digital skills for the silver generation, I called it. I teach people my age how to spot online scams, how to manage their finances on a tablet, how to use social media to connect with their grandchildren. I teach them how to be visible in a world that is increasingly digital. I am no longer just Evelyn, the mother or the grandmother. I am Evelyn, the teacher, the mentor, the woman who understands that technology isn't something to be feared. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used to build or to break. The most important thing I've learned is this: your value isn't determined by the people who take you for granted. It's determined the moment you decide you've had enough. In the comments, I want to hear about a moment when you realized your own worth. Your stories deserve to be told. And be sure to watch this next story. It's for every woman who's ever been underestimated.